I remember standing in the driveway that night, the summer air sticky with humidity, my eyes glued to the lit-up office windows above the garage. I could see him, my husband, the man I'd trusted with every ounce of my heart, leaning close to her. Not our 3-year-old daughter, but his business partner, Amy. Their heads bent together over a laptop, shoulders brushing. My chest tightened. A cold wave of dread washed through me. Something was so wrong in that glow of the screen. And then he looked up. Our eyes met. His smile faltered. He turned away, typing rapidly, as though trying to erase what I'd just witnessed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run inside and demand answers. But I froze, heart pounding, on the edge of knowing and never finding out. That moment never should have surprised me so much. It was the culmination of months, years, even, of little betrayals I'd chosen to ignore. When I closed my eyes that night, I saw flashes of how we'd begun. 2 starry-eyed graduates, herding portfolios and big plans in downtown cafes. Me, a graphic designer whose name once opened doors. Him, a computer science whiz with half-finished demos on his laptop. We dreamed up a future, our careers, children, adventures. I never imagined my own dreams would shrink to fit the contours of his. I was 27 when we met, hired as a junior designer at a small agency in Soho. He sat beside me at a team lunch, coffee in hand, wandering curiosity in his eyes. 29, he told me, working freelance on some app he was sure would change the world. We bonded over long shifts and late-night brainstorming. Helvetica versus Gotham, user flow versus database schema. By the time the agency threw a holiday party, I couldn't stop smiling when he brushed against my arm. Within 6 months we were inseparable. I found new clients, won small awards, landed a promotion to senior designer. He launched his app's beta, celebrated every minor update. We were unstoppable. A perfect pair, we thought. When he proposed that spring, I was finishing a branding project for an eco-startup. I said yes over the glow of my MacBook, surrounded by Pantone swatches and latte mugs. Our wedding was intimate. Close friends, a rooftop in Brooklyn, string lights. He whispered in my ear that I was going to change the world, and I believed it. Not long after, we learned we were expecting our first child. I was overjoyed, despite the morning sickness and mounting deadlines. I juggled maternity leave, client calls, and prenatal yoga. When our daughter, Sophie, arrived, time folded in on itself. Sleepless nights, tiny fingers wrapped around mine, midnight feedings. And slowly my career slipped. It began innocently. He was working from home more often, pitching to investors, attending networking dinners. He spoke starry-eyed about scaling, traction, seed rounds. I signed on as the first hire, designing the app's interface, the brand identity. I poured my creativity into wireframes and style guides, often sacrificing pay to be part of something big. He assured me he'd make it up to me once the startup took off. In the meantime, our second child arrived, a boy, Lucas, with wide, curious eyes. I swapped client meetings for playdates, negotiation emails for bedtime stories. My studio was a makeshift desk in the corner of our living room, paper splayed alongside toddlers' blocks. Gone were the agency's bright walls and the hum of creative teams. This was my new day job. School Rolodexes, diaper brands, call to pediatricians. I told myself it was worth it. I was building something meaningful. A family, memories, stability. I loved Sophie and Lucas fiercely. But I began to lose pieces of myself. The confident designer who sketched logos over cocktails, the woman who dressed in bold prints and strutted in heels to client pitches. My wardrobe became indistinguishable from other moms, a rotation of leggings and sneakers, hair tossed up when I remembered. Meanwhile, his startup grew. Investors loved the app's sleek interface. My work. Press mentions praised the elegant design. To our small network, we were the power couple. He, the visionary CEO, I, the creative director. I smiled and took bows at launch parties, standing behind him. My name tagged on a slide deck. His on the marquee. Behind closed doors, though, tension crept in. He'd come home late, claiming an urgent meeting, a pitch. His phone buzzed incessantly. Emails from someone named A. Morgan would light up his screen. When I asked, he'd murmur, "Just work stuff, babe." I nodded, pressing his back in support, though my gut twisted. He'd promised I'd return to my career once the kids were in school full-time. Just hang tight, he'd say, rubbing my arm. But school morning schedules rotated, and I never made it back into a full-time role. Instead, I continued designing our app's updates. Unpaid, unnamed. I remember the moment I first heard laughter in his home office that wasn't my children's. I paused outside the frosted glass door one late evening. He and Amy, his second-in-command, sat close, heads bowed together, laughing at a shared joke. I waited for the door to open, but it stayed shut. When I pressed my ear to the glass, their laughter froze. He stood abruptly. The click of Amy's chair followed. "Everything okay?" I asked softly, and he smiled. Too wide, too shuttered. "Just finishing up." That was months ago. By then, my heart had begun to bristle whenever he mentioned Amy's name. He'd talk about her strategic insights, and I'd tuck my pride behind a supportive nod. After all, wasn't I the one who left my career for this? Weren't I supposed to trust him? I made sacrifices I never imagined. I turned down offers from former colleagues, senior-level roles at boutique agencies with generous pay. I told my agent I wasn't available for magazine features and podcasts. Instead, I was available for diaper runs, for investor coffees, for babysitting, always on call for his startup's demands. And in return? He grew distant. Conversations once rich and playful turned tattered. Half-hearted updates on my day, rushed instructions on home logistics. I'd sit at the kitchen table, drinking cold coffee, watching our children play, craving a spark of connection that began to flicker out years ago. Then came the night I found the texts. I was looking for a restaurant reservation he'd made for our anniversary. One bite into my tiramisu, I picked up his phone to check the details. A notification popped up. "Can't wait to see you," pencil in my calendar, face blowing a kiss. My breath caught. I opened the message thread. It was Amy to him, messages full of inside jokes, thirsty hearts, weekend plans. And his replies were tender, flirtatious. Nothing about business. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My hands shook. For a moment, I considered deleting the convo, locking it away. But I took screenshots instead. Each image a nail hammered into the coffin of my trust. When he came home that night, I was waiting. I placed the screenshots on the dining table between us. The kids were asleep. The house echoed. He looked at the phone, back at me. His face paled, so pale I barely recognized him. I can explain," he stammered. "Explain." My voice cracked. "You've been lying to me for months, building our home on secrets." He swallowed. He tried to tell me it was a mistake, that Amy was just a friend, that he loved me. But the laughter, the closeness I saw through the office window, none of it added up. My heart pounded with rage and sorrow. Betrayal of my body, my mind, my identity. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't wait for him to leave. I simply walked out. I drove away from the dream we built together. Our home, our life. I left our children with a babysitter, promising to return. But I wasn't sure where I was going, or if I would ever be the same. I crashed in a friend's spare room, staring at the ceiling, wishing I could replay my life and make different choices. How had I let myself vanish? Where was the woman who once sketched logos at midnight, who once painted murals in cafes? I spent days in a haze of grief, scrolling through my old portfolio, tracing the lines of projects I'd poured my soul into. The colors on the screen beckoned me, whispering, "You haven't lost everything." But the betrayal ran deeper than career wounds. He'd deceived me emotionally, told me I was valued yet treated me as invisible. He'd taken our shared dreams and warped them around his ambition, leaving me scrambling for scraps of my own life. It was in those dark, teary days, watching old client testimonials, rereading my design reviews, that a flicker of determination reawakened. If I could design interfaces, I could design a new life. If I could brand a startup from scratch, I could brand myself anew. But first I had to let the anger burn through me, find the raw edges of pain and use them to carve a path forward. And so I began to plan. I wrote down every little thing that made me feel like me. The smell of acrylic paint, the curve of a custom typeface, the knot of nerves before a client pitch. I listed my strengths: concept development, storytelling through visuals, managing teams. I reminded myself of deadlines I'd crushed, awards I'd won, praise I'd forgotten. That list became my manifesto. Betrayal might have taken away my home, my marriage, my sense of security. But it could never steal my creativity, my grit, my worth. I was standing in my friend's cramped living room that afternoon, portfolio in hand, when I realized I was ready to face the world again. I closed the designer's notebook that had recorded my lowest points and began rewriting its final page with possibilities. Possibilities like moving to a new city where no one knew my story, starting my own studio to work with clients who valued my craft, networking with women entrepreneurs who'd reinvented themselves. Possibilities like picking up a paintbrush again, volunteering at an art center for at-risk youth, maybe even teaching. And the idea that once scared me, falling flat on my face in an interview, saying yes to a cold email from a stranger, suddenly felt doable. I would not be a footnote in someone else's success story. I would build my own legacy. But that night, standing in my driveway watching him and Amy, I didn't yet know how I'd find my way back. All I felt was the raw sting of betrayal and the first surge of something else. Hope that I could be the author of my own story again. I snapped out of the memory, heart pounding. The office window was dark now. No glow of screens, no shared laughter. I turned away and walked inside, determination settling over me like a warm coat. I was going to rise from this, rebuild, and thrive once more. But I didn't yet know how. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on the futon in my friend Claire's spare room, the pale morning light peeling back layers of my grief. My head buzzed with questions. Where would I go next? How would I support myself, and my kids? For the first time in years, I felt untethered, but surprisingly, I also felt alive. I spent that morning drafting a plan on Claire's kitchen table, napkins and receipts spread out like a chaotic timeline of my life. The first line was the hardest to write. Move. I needed distance from the house where every corner whispered his lies. Claire's loft in Queens was safe, but not forever. I needed somewhere to call my own. I'd visited Chicago once, on a business trip before Sophie was born. A week of interviews at agencies, art museums, and skyline views that took my breath away. The city's energy crackled in my bones. It felt like a fresh start. I looked up neighborhoods, rental prices, schools. By late afternoon, I was emailing realtors. Next up, reignite. My portfolio was dusty. My confidence more so. But my skills hadn't vanished just because I'd been out of the game. I'd spent years designing interfaces, mentoring junior designers, crafting brand identities that resonated. I saved every file, every mock-up, prototype, sketch, backed them up on an external drive. I printed my favorite case studies and made notes in the margins. Why this worked, how I could improve it today. Then, network. I reached out to former colleagues, professors, even strangers whose work I admired. I told them I was relocating, rebuilding my studio, looking for collaborators. Some didn't reply. Others offered coffees, Zoom calls, introductions. One message stood out. From Mara, a woman I'd met at a design conference 9 years earlier. I'm launching a co-working space for women founders, she wrote. I'd love to have you as a resident designer. And breathe, an odd entry, but vital. I signed up for a weekly pottery class at a local studio near Claire's. My hands had forgotten the texture of clay, but as the wheel spun beneath my fingers, I felt pieces of my old self reassemble. Pottery wasn't design, but it reminded me that creativity lived in my blood, beyond screens and slide decks. Within 2 weeks, I had an apartment lined up in Logan Square, Chicago, a sunlit 2-bedroom with exposed brick and high ceilings. I signed the lease online, my pulse racing despite the 6-hour time difference. I told Sophie and Lucas we were going on a new adventure. Sophie, now 6, cheered. Lucas, 4, asked if we'd see giraffes. I laughed and promised to look for a zoo. Packing was a ceremony. I wrapped our children's favorite toys, but also my art supplies. Watercolor set, sketchbooks, fabric swatches. I sold most of the furniture. After all, this was a chance to curate a new life. The moving truck left on a cloudless Saturday, and I followed behind with Sophie curled in the passenger seat, Lucas asleep in the back. Claire waved as we passed, tears in her eyes. I mouthed, "Thank you," and we veered west. Chicago greeted us with a breeze off Lake Michigan, gulls wheeling overhead, and a skyline that felt familiar and foreign all at once. I took a deep breath and smiled. It had been years since I'd felt that simple shift, the beginning of something new. Our first weeks were a whirlwind, enrolling the kids in school, assembling flat-pack furniture, unpacking boxes labeled books, kids' clothes, design stuff. I set up a small desk by the window in our apartment where I could see the city's rooftops. Late at night, I'd tap on the keyboard, emailing potential clients, updating my website, posting on LinkedIn. Hello, Chicago. Independent designer available for brand identity, UI/UX, and creative consulting. It took patience. I pitched to 10 companies before landing my first paid gig. A local organic food co-op needing a logo refresh and packaging redesign. The budget was modest, but it was a start. I poured my heart into it. Hand-drawn lettering, custom illustrations of farm animals, biodegradable packaging mock-ups. When the co-op launched the new products, they sent me a photo of their shelves glimmering with my art. My chest swelled. Next came referrals. A boutique fitness studio, a children's bookstore, a craft beer startup. I worked while the kids were at school, carving pockets of time between pickups and after-bedtime rituals. I found a rhythm. Morning emails, school drop-off, client calls over coffee, preschool pickup, dinner, a little more work, then sleep. It wasn't the endless deadlines and big budgets of my old agency life, but every project felt deeply mine. Meanwhile, Mara invited me to join her co-working space. The Annex ***, a bright loft in the West Loop where women founders and freelancers shared desks, coffee, and inspiration. I set up my laptop on a communal table, a neon sign behind me that read, "Create fearlessly." Weekly events, panels on pitching, lunches with local VCs, branched me into new networks. I led a workshop on brand storytelling through visual design, teaching others how to translate their mission into color palettes and typography. The room buzzed with energy as participants sketched mood boards and gave each other feedback. I might have been rusty at pitching my own expertise, but teaching reminded me that I was good at this. By the end of the year, I felt the foundations of a real studio taking shape. I rebranded my freelance practice as Wren Co, named after the bird that builds speckled nests in unexpected places. I hired 2 part-time contractors, a junior designer and a project manager. Both women, both hungry to learn. We booked a small office in a converted warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, where I painted a mural on one wall. An abstract phoenix rising from broken wings. It was a nod to the past I'd outgrown and the future I was crafting. Of course, growth wasn't linear. There were late nights wrestling with scope creep, frustrated phone calls when clients missed deadlines, moments when invoices bounced back as undeliverable. There were nights I lay awake worrying. Was I in over my head? What if Wren Co failed? But then I'd remember the screenshots on my phone, proof of his betrayal, and realize failure was less scary than living a lie. Life unfolded in layers of triumphs and tiny setbacks. Sophie learned to ride a bike. Lucas drew his first recognizable giraffe. I enrolled them in art classes at a community center, where I volunteered as an assistant teacher on weekends. Watching their creativity bloom reminded me that design wasn't just a profession. It was a way of seeing, of giving form to wonder. I also found therapy in reclaiming my body. Weeknights I joined a bar class, Saturday mornings, a spinning session. Movement that had nothing to do with feeding kids or pitching work, but everything to do with honoring myself. I wore bold lipstick again, bought a leather jacket that made me feel invincible, drove the kids to school blasting music I loved. Divorce proceedings loomed. I dreaded the paperwork, the financial disclosures, the custody negotiations. But when the time came, I walked into the attorney's office with Wren Co.'s profit and loss statements, my bedroom lease, my bank records. I didn't need to hide in his shadow anymore. We settled quickly, shared custody, equitable division of assets, no alimony, I was earning. He offered a lump sum, a gesture of goodwill, but I declined. My independence was secured by my own labor. The day the divorce was final, I held the papers in my hands like a victory flag. I cried, not for the end of us, but for the beginning of me. I took the afternoon off, booked an Uber to Edgewater Beach, and sat on the sand in my leather jacket. The wind off the lake tangled my hair. The skyline shimmered. I closed my eyes, inhaled the horizon, and felt like I could finally breathe. Professionally, Wren Co. continued to grow. By the second year, we'd moved into a proper office downtown, 9 of us on staff, clients from coast to coast. Tech startups, nonprofits, even a small film festival. My days were full of creative challenges and mentoring my team. At night, I pitched in on bedtime stories and dipped Sophie's toes in the lake. Balance was still a juggling act, but now it was one I'd chosen. The emotional scars remained, but they softened with time. I found a therapist who helped me untangle anger from regret, shame from responsibility. I learned to forgive myself for staying too long, for doubting my worth, and even to forgive him, not for his sake, but so I could step out of that story and write my own. Friends teased me that I'd become that woman, the one who left an unfaithful husband and started a kick-ass business. But I know my journey isn't a cliché. It's woven from heartbreak and hope, from sleepless nights and painted murals, from cold mornings signing leases to warm afternoons teaching art to inner-city teens. One evening, at our 10th anniversary reunion with college friends, I stood in a circle of people who knew me before the children, before the startup, before the betrayal. They marveled at my success, at the studio's growth, at my confidence. I smiled and told them the truth. I had to lose everything to find myself again. They nodded, but I knew they only saw the headlines. What they didn't see were the nights I cried into a sketchbook, the mornings I woke with my heart in my throat, the slow rebuilding of trust in my own abilities. They didn't know how I'd stared down my worst fears, failure, abandonment, insignificance, and emerged stronger. Today, Wren Co hosts annual Design and Soul retreats for women creatives. We teach typography and human-centered design, but also self-care and resilience. I speak at conferences about the intersection of creativity and healing. Sophie wants to be an animator. Lucas sketches robots in his notebooks. I tell them every day, you are limitless. My ex-husband once warned me that chasing my dreams would make me selfish. He was right. Selfish in the best way possible. I focused on myself, my passions, my needs. I rebuilt my life from the ruins of betrayal, using heartache as mortar and hope as the cornerstone. A few months ago, I passed that old office building, our first startup headquarters. New tenants had moved in, the windows dark, no soft glow of screens. I paused my car, watching for a moment. Then I smiled, turned the wheel, and drove on. Because I know now that real success isn't measured by someone else's approval or by the names on a marquee. Success is waking up each day excited to create, supported by people who see your worth, free to design your own destiny. And I, Wren, designer and Phoenix, have finally done just that.